So we're here in Matthew 7, and this is, of course, part of the Sermon on the Mount. And we're about halfway through the Sermon on the Mount, no more than halfway through. And remember, this is where God wants us to live, and we will all fail. And so the reason in the Bible it says that the main reason for the law is to make us realize that we need to have Jesus Christ. We need to come to Jesus Christ for what we need. And so we will fail, but we're going to talk about this. I've titled this message, Remove the Log Jam. Remove the Log Jam. I looked at, there was a place in I think it's Salmon River in Idaho, called Pistol Creek Rapids. Sometime in 2006, I pulled this thing up on YouTube and was looking at it. And they had these different rafters that come down, and they had come to this place, and I guess it's a rafting of a number of days. And so they're out here in the middle of the wilderness, and they showed the rafts lined up, and there looked to be I'm thinking maybe 15 or 20 rafts. And so a number of people, and they had come to this log jam, and so they were having to camp because they couldn't get past this log jam. And so they had to have the forest people come down, and they talked about different ways of how they could remove the log jam. And so finally what they decided was to actually put some dynamite in there, and they videotaped this thing, and it blew, and some of the logs went flying through the air, but it looked like it wasn't even going to do it. But then it slowly started to release, and then the logs went down, and you hear the people saying yay and all this stuff, because they had been camped there for 3 days waiting for someone to remove this log jam. So, where we're going to be talking, he's talking about the speck in your neighbor's eye with a log in your own. And so that's why I'm calling this Remove the Log Jam. So basically what we're looking at is first clean up your own life before you try to clean up the lives of somebody else. So that's what we're looking at. So let me read this passage, and then we'll come back and talk about it, and then as we go through, we'll do some application, and we'll do a little more application at the end. So Matthew chapter 7, verse 1. Jesus says, "Judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, Let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn again and rend you." So he says, in verse 1, he says, "Judge not." Now, this type of a judgment is you're looking at what people say or what people do, and you're finding fault. You're judging them. You're finding fault. Yesterday, Tabitha made some truffles, and boy, did they look good. And guess what? It's birthday Sunday, so she will have maybe one truffle, just enough to make your stomach angry. But they're really delicious, and I hope. Now, if I had sat there and picked at her as she was making the meal, I don't even cook. I mean, I made some toast this morning, and I have done some eggs and things like this, but I've never made truffles. And so if I had sat there and picked apart what she was doing, that's the type of judging that he's talking about. Now, Christ is not forbidding all judgment on all things and all people, but he's talking about hypocritical judging, being a hypocrite. Or as Tootie Bird says, a hypotwit. So, for example, in 1 Corinthians, he says that we're to judge sin in the church. Do you remember there was a man who had his father's wife, if I remember, it would not have been his mother, but he was having wrong relationships. We're to judge between Christian brothers. In other words, if there's something going on between Troy and I shouldn't take Troy to court. You guys should be able to figure it out between us. You're to listen to what I'm saying in 1 Corinthians 14. You're to listen to what I'm saying and to say, is that guy speaking what God is saying, or is he wrong? And so you're to judge what I'm saying. In 1 Corinthians 2, it says we're to judge that he's given us the mind of Christ as Christians, and so we can judge all things. And we judge all things through the light of God's word. And in fact, in verse 5, he calls people dogs and pigs, swine, pigs. And so he is making a judgment. And so he's not talking about judging in a proper way, in a godly way, but he's talking about hypocritical judging. So that's what he's talking about. In verse 2, he says, with the type of judgment you judge, you're going to be judged. And with the type of measure you meet, or the standard that you put out, you're going to have the same standard put back to you. However you measure people, it's going to be measured back to you. However you judge people, it's going to be judged back to you. Somehow, you don't know how it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to be. But God, this is a promise from God. If you judge this way, he's going to judge the same way back to you. So, for example, in Judges chapter 1, there was a king named Adonai-Bezek. And when he overcame people, he would cut off their thumbs, and he would cut off their big toes, their great toes, and then he would make them beggars. And he did that to 70 different kings. And you know what happened when Israel overtook him and overcame him? They cut off his thumbs and they cut off his big toes. And he said, with the same thing that I've done, God has paid me back. And so how you judge is going to come back to you. So in verse 3, he says, why do you behold, or why do you look at the mote, or the speck of dust, or the splinter that's in your brother's eye, that's in some other Christian's eye? Why are you looking at that little speck in their eye, but you're not thinking about the beam or the log that's hanging out of your own eye? So I have a beam. I thought about getting a nasty, dirty one, but I thought, well, that'll be too big and heavy, and I'll get dirty and stuff. So here's my beam. Oops, sorry. Shh, that's noisy. Some dusting over here. So I think this is actually a flagpole because it's got some little things here, and I found it up in there. But anyway, so if Tabitha has a speck in her eye, and I say, let me get that thing out of your eye, bam! If I'm not paying attention to what's in my own eye, how can I try to help her with what's in her eye? I can't even get close enough to her. So that's what he's saying. So then in verse 5, he calls them hypocrites. Thou hypocrite. A hypocrite is an actor or a pretender. And he says, you hypocrite, first cast out your own beam. Get the beam out of your own eye. In Romans chapter 2, Paul writing says, thou art inexcusable, O man, whosoever thou art that judgest. For wherein thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself. For thou that judgest doest the same things. So what he's saying is, there's no excuse for you if you're judging somebody else. You're doing the same thing. Often. I remember a time when I was probably 18 or 19, and one of my sisters did something, and I said, you know what? About 10 years later, same thing. So you're judging people, but you're doing the same thing that you're judging them for. So what does he say? He says, after the beam is out, then you can see clearly to get the speck. He's not saying not to get the speck out of Tabitha's eye. He's saying get the beam out of your own eye first. Then you can see clearly. So God encourages us to help each other with things in each other's lives. But he says, first look at this one right here. First look at yourself. And so many of us, including me, we can so quickly see the faults in somebody else. You know, we can see it. Well, you might get in trouble if you say that. I won't say it. If I say something that's bad, then when I get home, she doesn't really. She's very nice to me. I won't say that. I was going to say that she says something about me, and guess what? I say the same thing about her, and guess what? We both do it. There. That's safe, maybe. We'll find out when I get home. I'll know if it was safe or not. In James chapter 1, James says, "But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he be not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work. This man shall be blessed in his deed." So what he's saying is, look in this book. This is the perfect law of liberty. When you look in this book and you use it as a mirror to see what's going on with you, then you'll be blessed in what you're doing. So make sure you're looking at yourself. So first, take care of your own log. Get your own log out of your eye, and then you can help others. Verse 6, he says, "Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn again and rend you." So this is saying that once you've gotten the log out of your eye, and you do try to help someone, you do try to talk to someone, they may not appreciate the fact that you're trying to help them. Now he says dogs, which would have been a person that had an impure mind, or he's a person or she's a person that has a lot of contempt for others. They think that they're better than other people, and they're not interested in what you're saying. They don't want to hear it. A swine in the Old Testament, the pig was an unclean animal, so this would be an unclean person. So basically, it's people that they think they're better than everybody else, and they're not really interested in what you're going to say. And so he says, don't give your good things to them, the holy things. You know, the dogs might have been outside of the city, and they had the sacrifices, and the dogs might try to eat the holy things. Or the pearl, you know, might be something good that you're saying, and they may not receive it. They may reject it. And in fact, they may reject it so much, they'll get angry with you that you said it, and they'll turn and they'll... And so he's basically saying, use judgment, use carefulness, who you speak to and how you speak to them. In Titus chapter 3, it says, "A man that is a heretic is somebody that's he's self-promoting, he's causing divisions, he doesn't really care about the things of God. A man that is a heretic, after the first and second admonition reject, knowing that that such is subverted and sinneth, being condemned of himself." So he's a person that won't be interested in it. So let's apply this a little bit to ourselves, okay? The first thing, so there's 1, 2, 3, in case you're taking notes, 5 things. The first thing is, don't criticize. You know, we have to be, we can be discerning. We can be thinking about, you know, how are people walking. This guy sometimes has a tendency to be impatient with people, and so she sees it, and she'll tell me, "Be nice." That's basically what she says. Be nice, and she's right. And a lot of times, many times, she saved me from putting my foot in it, right? Be nice. And so then I say, okay, I'll be nice. And sure enough, she was right. And so now, but she's not criticizing. She doesn't say, "You're never nice." That would be criticizing. But she's saying it kindly. She's saying lovingly, "Be nice." Because I was going to make I should have made a cartoon, a cardboard boomerang, you know, but it wouldn't have worked anyway. I would have thrown it, and it would have hit Samantha right in the head or something. So you take the boomerang and you throw it out, and it comes back and wallops you. So the criticism that you throw out, you know, is going to come back and hit you. So don't criticize. The second thing is, be full of goodness. Be full of goodness. I want you to turn. We're in Matthew. Matthew, Mark. So turn to Romans. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans. Romans 15:14. I want to show you a verse. Romans 15, verse 14. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans. Romans 15, verse 14. Romans 15:14. Paul says, now remember, Jesus said, after you take the beam out, then take out the speck. So he says in Romans 15, verse 14, Paul says, and I myself also am persuaded of you, my brethren, that ye also are full of goodness, filled with all knowledge, able also to admonish one another. So he's saying you are able to admonish one another, meaning gently correct and instruct. But what does he say at the beginning of that? You're full of all goodness. What does that mean? That means that you've taken the beam out of your own eye. You've looked at yourself. You've thought about yourself, and so you're being kind. You're walking rightly. You're not condemning. You're not criticizing. You're lovingly trying to help someone to get to where they are to be. You're giving instructions because you love this person. You're trying to help them. You're not trying to criticize and trying to tell everybody how wonderful you are and raise yourself up on a pedestal. But you're full of goodness. So before you pull the speck out, check your heart. Are you full of goodness, or is that thing in there? Remember what Jesus said when the woman was caught in adultery and they dragged her to him? He said, the first one that's without sin, throw the stone. And so what did they do? They all left. So basically what he was saying, the first one that does not have the beam in their eye, you throw the stone. And so they all left. And so we need to be willing to be that way, to be humble, to look at ourselves. If Tabitha had the beam in her eye, and she says, Dad, I want to help you. I see there's a speck in your eye, and so she starts coming toward me. Oh, she bangs me in the head. Ouch! Stop! Your beam is. I'm going to get real close. Her beam is just. I know you're trying to help me, but ouch. The person that there's people sometimes they're trying to help you, but their beam, it just gets in the way. My dad used to have this silly saying, but he was sort of halfway admitting what he was doing. He would say, "Do as I say, not as I do." Do as I say, not as I do. Meaning, I'm doing wrong, but you do right because I'm telling you to do right. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear what you're saying. So Tabitha's telling me, Dad, you got a speck in your eye. And you know what? There might really be a speck in my eye. But the problem is she's got a beam in her eye. So I hear what you're saying, but it's like, I told my wife, it's like the person, I get a little bit of pudge here, so I'm trying to lose it. My wife says, you look good, don't lose any weight, I don't want you to be skinny. But I'm in fairly good shape. And so it'd be like if someone was as big as a house and they were telling me, don't eat greasy hamburgers because they're bad for you. Dude, it might be right. Greasy hamburgers might be bad for me. But I'm not going to listen to what you're saying because you're as big as a house. Why should I hear what you're saying? So that's the second one, be full of goodness. The third one is be spiritual. So again, I want you to turn to Galatians 6, verse 1. Galatians 6, verse 1. So you're in Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatians. Galatians 6, 1. Be spiritual. Galatians 6, 1. Galatians 6, 1. Paul, writing, says, brethren, so he's talking to Christians, right? Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, Restore such an one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. You which are spiritual. So what he's saying is, you're walking in the Spirit. The Spirit's governing you. He's telling you, this is what I want you to do. You're listening to him. You're spiritual. In other words, you've gotten the beam out of your eye. You took it out. He says, you which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. Restore. So Caleb put up this whiteboard upstairs for the kids up there. And so yesterday we were putting it up, and he, for me, I just would have gone, put in 4 screws and we're good. But he made it nice. He put in little wood pegs. And so we put the screw in there, but then we had to make a bigger hole for the peg, because the screw head's like this and then the peg is like that. And so we started taking the drill, and it's made out of the frame is made out of pine. And so we started taking the drill, and of course, what does the drill want to do? It wants to start grabbing right away and gobbling it all up. And so we had to back it out, and so we had to restore it. We had to take out the knife, and Caleb he found a tool that was just about the same size as the peg, so he made an indentation in there. And so we very carefully were scraping it because we didn't want to chop it all up. So we restored it, and then we put the peg in. So what he's saying is, if you're trying to help someone, don't be like that drill and chewing them all up. Instead, be restored. You're trying to help them. You can see that they're not making the right choice, they're not making the right way, but you're trying to lovingly help them. And he says to do it how? He says to do it in the spirit of meekness. That's gentleness and kindness and love, humility. And so there's being spiritual or full of goodness, and then there's being carnal or not walking in the Spirit. And so Paul gives an example, which you don't need to turn there, but in 1 Corinthians 3, he calls them carnal. And why does he call them carnal? He says because there's envying and strife and divisions. And so they're not spiritual, and so they're not able to properly be restoring and helping people. They're over here, they're carnal, they're believers, but there's fighting and there's envying and there's strife, and they're doing it for the wrong reason. And so, again, let me get this out of my eye, and then I can help. So if I'm angry all the time, how can I talk to somebody about not being angry? Or if I'm drinking and smoking marijuana or taking meth or something like this, how can I talk to somebody about that stuff? If I'm looking at pornography, how can I rebuke other people and tell them you need to live a clean life? If at my house, I tell my family, I want you to have a clean bedroom. I want you to have clean this or clean that. And then everything that I do is a big slobby mess, and my room is a wreck. How can I tell them to do that? My dad, whom I love, he died at 92. He's in heaven for 10 years. 11 years. She knows everything. I love him. And yet, when I was growing up, I remember I worked for him for a time at his shop, and we'd be driving in the car on the way home. He would be taking me home and stuff. And he would be telling me stuff. And the stuff he was telling me was good stuff. But you know what? He wasn't doing what he was telling me to do. And so even at that young age, I was probably 17 or 16 or something like that. I remember thinking, but Dad, I didn't say it because I was afraid if I said it. But I remember thinking, but Dad, you're not doing what you're saying. And it was good stuff that he was saying, but he wasn't doing what he was saying. So again, let's get this thing out of our eyes. I couldn't preach against stealing if I went to the offering box after everybody left. Well, there's some cash in there. I couldn't preach against, So Jesus, he's not saying that we can't. We can. We need to admonish each other. But first, we need to consider the beam. I need to think about the beam. And then I can talk to other people. So let's almost close this up with also a warning. A warning. I won't turn there to it for you, but just think about this. In Romans 14, he talks about things that are doubtful disputations. In other words, it could be this way, it could be that way. He talks about how one believes he can eat everything. One believes he should eat only herbs. One person says every day is alike. One person says this day is special. And he says, the person that eats everything eats to the Lord. The person that eats only herbs eats to the Lord. The person that has every day the same has it to the Lord. The person that has one day special more than others has it to the Lord. And then he says, let not him that eats despise him that eats not, and let not him which eats not judge him that eats, for God has received him. Who art thou that judgest another man's servant? To his own master he standeth or falleth, yea, he shall be holden up, for God is able to make him stand. For example, so let's give us a silly sort of an example. My children, I don't remember who it was, it might have been Katie, several years ago, bought Argyle socks. I won't show you the rest of my leg, because it's very white. Where's my sunglasses? So the only time I wear Argyle socks is on Sundays, and I've started wearing them on Wednesdays too, because I thought, well, I might as well wear them on Wednesdays too, to church. Now, for a while, I'll tell you how silly this guy is. When I got Argyle socks, I would never buy Argyle socks for myself. Now I might, but I never would, because I thought, I'm in church, and so I should put a good, presentation. So I would only wear solid socks. But I started wearing Argyle socks. So let's say that, sorry Tabitha, you're in the front row, I'm picking on you today. So let's say I'm sitting over here, and Tabitha sees he's wearing Argyle socks. That's disgusting. Only you should wear solid socks in church. She gets all spun up. Well, it's a doubtful disputation, because there's nothing in here about Argyle socks. And so the warning is to make sure that it's really a speck that you should be concerned about. If it's something about Argyle socks, if you can't show me in the Bible that Argyle socks are not right, then I'm sorry. Now I'm going to go out on a limb as far as the Baptist world is concerned. This is not in the Bible. This tie. This coat is not in the Bible. If I came up here, which I'm not doing it today, my wife's got this, she's getting this worried, look, oh, this is the best. But if I was to come up here with tennis shoes on, it's not in the Bible, whether I should wear tennis shoes or not. So that's the doubtful disputation. Now, for some people, it might be offensive. The pastor should wear something more pastory, and so I do. But all I'm saying is that if the spec that you're after is not in the Bible, make sure it's in the Bible, and make sure you can really point to it as being in the Bible before you start to go. And again, make sure that the beam's not in your own eye. And guess what? We're all going to fail this. I have failed it. You have failed it. And so we need to receive God's forgiveness through Jesus Christ, right? Because we cannot walk our life without his mercy, without his grace. Because I'll be overly critical, I'll come after Tabitha and talk to her about this, and I've got the stupid beam hanging out of my eye. Or even if I don't have the beam hanging out of my eye, I might be overly critical about her stack or something. So we need to receive God's forgiveness, because we'll fail. So through Jesus Christ, we receive his forgiveness. So let's pray, and then we'll will take part in the Lord's Supper. Father, I pray that you've spoken to each one of us, Lord. You've spoken to me, Lord, in this thing. And Father, help us to be right-minded. Lord, if you do want us to help each other, you do want us to admonish each other, but you want us to consider our own selves first. If there's a beam in our eye, if there's something that we're doing, not that we can reach perfection, Lord, because we never will. But Lord, help us to be willing to look at our own selves first and consider, is there something in my life, is there something in my heart that I should take care of first? And then, Lord, help us to restore each other in the spirit of meekness and with gentleness and kindness, trusting you to do the work, Lord, because you're the one that works in people's hearts, Lord, not us. And Father, I thank you for this. And Father, help us to also realize that we need Jesus Christ for salvation. We need Jesus Christ for forgiveness. We need Jesus Christ for holiness, because we cannot live that life, and yet he lived it. He died on the cross for us to take away our sins, to give us a relationship with you. And so, Lord, I thank you for your mercy and for your grace. In Jesus' name.